Hi, I'm Rigger. This is You Are Right, and today let's get conceptual. Before that though, be sure to like the video if you like it, share it if you think others would like it, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and subscribe if you want to see more. So, maidens lack imagination. Believe it or not, this isn't a shot at Rooster Teeth, but a natural theory I think goes some way towards explaining some maidens' behaviours. Magic has always been a weird point for this show, so let's look into it. Despite the fact we all know this, let's quickly cover the groundwork snappily. Oz had magic, just like Salem and everyone else at that time. Then, the world goes bang, and everyone comes back, and several lifetimes later, Oz gives large chunks of his magic, which he still has and Salem still has, over to 4 young women. He splits up his magic pool. He just carves 4 big chunks out of his mana bar and hands them over to 4 young women to use as they see fit, believing that they are good souls, and they become the first maidens. So, their magic pool is his magic pool. It's all raw magic, they can all do the same thing. Now, people favour what they favour. Who'd have guessed that Cinder favours fire? But if she wanted to, she could throw some ice, she could do whatever, she has done. Also, if you want to get into it, there could be some real psychology involved in why they act the way they do. You may not have restrictions on your powers, but if you're told you're inheriting the winter powers, you live in the snow, and you also just happen to inherit them while inside a giant ice cube, there's a good chance that you'll default towards using ice. Personal preference, outside factors, and situational elements will all factor into why they choose to use the powers how they do. But here's the detail that catches my eye. We've seen electrical effects, we've seen ice multiple times, we've seen fire of course, we've seen summon weapons too, we've seen wind effects and flying. Maidens can do a whole lot. The fact Amber flew seemingly using wind power, but Cinder makes herself into Iron Man, and that's both with the same set of powers at their disposal, should really tell you what you need to know. But then I thought about Oz and Salem. Then I thought even more back to the flashback, back to their time. See, Oz and Salem have magic, and so did everyone. But let's look at their magic. Torch beams, riding tornadoes, death balls, etc. And in the flashback, there's even more variety of attacks and spells, with weird flying balls as well as elemental attacks. So why can't maidens do this whole thing? They have the same magic, so why can't they throw death balls? Well, simple answer, they can. But they don't think to. Now, using magic, I'm sure like anything else, takes time and practice. For some of this, there seems to be specific movements too, so maybe they just don't have people to teach them these spells, if you want to think of them as spells. But also, seemingly a lot of this does come from your imagination and your will. The raw potential is evident, but look at what happens when Penny is under pressure. She makes her swords from the element her powers are named after. Winter Maiden, Ice Element, my swords. Because that's what she's used to. In a panic, she defaulted down to the most base thing in her mind as a response. It's why Cinder's swords are the shapes that they are. She made weapons and projectiles in a similar way before she had maiden powers, and now she can just do it at will. But she makes swords reminiscent of the ones she used to use. Same with her bow. And a corruption of Pyrrha's spear as well. She's pulling from reference and memory, it's how the brain works. Even when they flex and they can do weird stuff like these giant swords, but it's still Raven making herself a katana, with what appears to be her preferred element of ice that she defaulted to multiple times. Even when Penny tried to make it hail inside, it still took the form of a storm over her head and she had to think about it. The point is this, and I can't believe this is my example, but it says it best somehow. Does anyone remember the movie Wanted? The stylized over-the-top action movie based on the graphic novel where they curve bullets? Okay, in that movie they tell him to curve bullets, and he tells them, obviously, that that's crazy. And he's instructed, if no one ever told you that bullets only fly straight and you wanted to curve it, what would you do? And it's like that here. Cinder, Penny, Amber, Raven, Freya, they've all been taught that bullets fly straight. Yes, there are semblances in RWBY, but it's not thought of in that universe as magic, as effects of magic. They're unique to each person as well. So, if you want effects and weapons, you go to dust. So, when they think in terms of magic and powers, their mind defaults to what they know. The elements you can get through dust, and the weapons they know like swords. It's how the world has conditioned them to think. It doesn't matter how much Salem might teach her different later. In a pinch, Cinder's mind is always going to default to the information she was raised with. Yes, Cinder can just throw fireballs, and Amber threw electricity, and Penny can just blast ice, but they're still defaulting to these elements. Oz and Salem don't have this issue, and it's for one important reason. That wasn't the case when they were raised. They were raised in a time of magic, in a time where energy balls, riding tornadoes, pain beams, etc. were normal concepts in the art of what they do. Magic free from just base elements in the form of weapons. There were weapons, sure, there were swords and bows that they could mimic, but being raised and learning, you won't just default to those base ideals, because now this expanded idea of what magic can do is part of your base ideals. You know it's possible from the outset. If Cinder sat and tried, I'm sure she could make a death ball or a pain beam, but if you start punching her in the face, she's going to default to fire and swords because that's what's in her mind. That's what she'll lean towards. It's her reactionary response. All maiden usage we see is them being reactionary and fighting. It's like any of us in a fight. You have to practice and learn to react in a trained way. That's what a professional fighter is. But if you have no training and you start fighting, you're just gonna go off instinct and it'll be just what comes to mind, which is what you've seen and what you know. If we want to see more out of their maiden powers than just what we've seen already, just them making their weapons again, and things that in some way could almost be seen as sort of closed-minded and boring, just beams of one element and, like I said, making their weapons again, then we need someone to teach them or show them. Penny and Cinder need lessons, not just on how to use the magic they have, but they need time to think and be taught, to broaden their mind and the possibilities. It's more than just fire, ice, and lightning, and wind. You can attack without just it being a bare blast of an element or a recreation of a real-life weapon. Harvesting the raw powers of nature makes you feel godlike, makes it sound crazy, but it's even crazier when you realize you don't even have to rely on summoning the forces of nature, you can do more. But it's also not just experience. As we see with Freya, yeah, her mind was going, she was suffering from degeneration with age, but her raw power was there, but it still came out in the form of ice and just blasts of an element. So while you become stronger with time and age, you won't learn to think more broadly. What you need is a teacher. But unless there is many years of practice with a teacher, they're never going to think of it in a pinch, even if they learn it's possible. Whereas Salem clearly has her own preference of magic that she defaults to because she was raised in a time with less restrictive ideas about what magic is. When she defaults to these black magic pain death balls, that's just what her go-to is, but that isn't an element you and I recognize. It's not a grim power either, it's just magic. What is this green beam that Oscar shoots on instinct? Who knows? It's magic, it's not just, here's a beam of ice and fire. But you need to teach them. So if we do get a travel arc and a training arc here, it could be a good time to do this, where someone, I don't know why it would be Salem, because she doesn't seem to have Cinder in the highest regard, but maybe just use her as a tool to teach her to do more than just throw fire at people and make your swords again. And maybe Oz can consult Penny that she can do more than what she's been doing. It will take a lot of work before it becomes anything close to reactionary for them when put in a fight, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. However, we also have the issue that, as we have been told, the more magic Oz uses, the faster him and Oscar start merging, start becoming one, and that's an issue. So he can't just keep showing Penny with magic. So without examples, it's going to be even harder. But when you think about it, it does explain why a lot of maidens just default to perhaps one element and, in a pinch, a second one. Why they just remake swords and a lot of these things that you might think is a very lame use of the powers, a very restrictive use of the powers, because they don't have a lot of examples of what else to do. And they weren't raised in a time where more possibilities were even thought of. There is a reason that Salem can, in a flash, ride a tornado around, because who would have think to do that? But she was raised in a time when perhaps it was more common to think to do that. This lady can throw pink balls in a ring, but who's going to teach Cinder to do that? Who's going to show Cinder that you even can do that? So it's just something that came to mind, that I think one of the biggest issues that maidens lack in the story is a lack of magic examples, as well as a lack of magic teachers. So they all just default to, we know dust and we know weapons, so we make things with dust elements and we recreate weapons. Or just bare blasts of an element, like using raw dust, same thing. They're restricted by this idea of dust, and that's simply how they were raised. Anyway, just a little idea that would explain the psychology of it, at least it makes sense to me. Let me know what you think. So, if they can, maybe find someone to think outside the box, or a place to learn and see outside the box, perhaps in Wonderland. If they're doing Wonderland Arc, maybe they'll see more magic that they can replicate. That would legitimately be a good thing you can get out of it. If people with maiden powers like Penny and Cinder are dropped into Wonderland, then maybe when they're in this realm of the gods or realm of magic, they can see more things that they might think to try and incorporate into the use of their powers. They might meet people with knowledge about magic who can tell them things that they'll understand about how to use their powers. This could really all be possible, and I would see it as a big bonus to add to what you can get out of an arc like this. If we're going to dive into the realms of magic, then let our magic users get a level up from it. And it doesn't have to be more power, it can just be more ideas, more things to think about, and more ways to act, more things to do. But we'll see if it happens that way. Until next time, my name is Rigo. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope I did alright.